So imagine you're standing at a crosswalk in like a really busy city, and a beat-up 20-year-old sedan is approaching the intersection. You step out into the street, basically assuming the driver is going to hit the brakes.
Right, because that's a social contract.
Exactly. But now, rewind that whole scenario. Same intersection, same crosswalk, but this time it's a brand new six-figure luxury sports car just roaring toward you. Does your gut tell you something different? Like, does your body tense up just a little bit more?
Oh, it absolutely does for most people. And what is really fascinating there is that your gut reaction in that moment isn't just some random prejudice.
Right.
It is a highly sophisticated subconscious calculation. I mean, your brain is aggressively trying to predict the future behavior of a total stranger just based on these fleeting contextual clues.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today we are diving into a concept that dictates almost every move we make, yet we fundamentally misunderstand how it works. We're talking about trust.
Yes, a massive topic.
Huge. And for this deep dive, we are pulling the framework from David DeSteno's incredible book, The Truth About Trust. And I think the biggest paradigm shift here for you, the listener, is realizing that trust isn't this magical moral aura. It's not some permanent badge of honor that someone just wears forever.
No, it is entirely dynamic. We have this really pervasive cultural myth that reputation is a stable, unmoving character trait.
Like, oh, they're just a good person.
Exactly. We think that if someone is fundamentally a quote-unquote good person, they are going to be honest in literally all situations. But the data completely shatters that idea. Human morality, and specifically trustworthiness, is incredibly variable.
So if it's not a permanent trait, what is it?
Well, to really understand it, we have to look at it as a dilemma of what psychologists call intertemporal choice.
Okay, break that term down for me. Intertemporal, so like between times.
Precisely. It is a constant, ongoing battle between the present and the future. Battle between, short-term selfishness and long-term cooperation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Aesop's fable of the ant and the grasshopper is actually the perfect model for this. So the ant represents the mechanisms in your brain focused on the future, toiling away, sacrificing immediate pleasure to build a long-term relationship or, social standing.
Right, doing the hard work now for a payoff later.
Exactly. And the grasshopper is entirely focused on the here and now. It wants the immediate payout. It just wants to be selfish today.
And eat the food right away.
Yep. So every time you decide whether to trust someone or whether to be trustworthy yourself, your mind is constantly weighing the ant against the grasshopper.
So it's basically a negotiation happening inside our heads all day long.
It is. And the really terrifying part is how easily that negotiation can be hijacked by momentary feelings, completely bypassing a person's supposed reputation.
Wait, really? Just a feeling can overwrite your entire moral baseline?
Oh, absolutely. DeSteno highlights this one experiment known as the give some game. Researchers brought participants into a lab to do incredibly tedious, boring work on a computer. And then after a while, they secretly triggered the computer to crash.
Oh, that is brutal. Just watching all your hard work vanish, I'd be furious.
The participants were visibly distressed, understandably. But then, a supposedly random person, who was actually a researcher in disguise, walks over, hits a few keys, and miraculously, quote-unquote, fixes the computer, completely restoring the lost data.
Oh man, the relief must have been massive.
Massive relief and a profound rush of gratitude toward this random stranger. Now, here is where the trust calculation actually comes in. The researchers then had these participants play an economic game where they had to decide how much money to entrust to a partner.
Okay.
The participants who had just been rescued by the stranger became significantly more trusting and cooperative. But here's the kicker. They didn't just trust the person who fixed their computer.
Wait, they trusted everyone?
Yes. They were far more willing to hand over their money to complete strangers who had absolutely nothing to do with the computer crash.
So just the lingering emotional state of gratitude was enough to, completely silence their internal grasshopper? They became universally more trusting just because they were in a good mood?
Yes.
Yeah.
The momentary emotion just tipped the scales heavily toward the ant. And unfortunately, this manipulation works in the opposite direction too.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah. Look at the fake sunglasses study. Researchers had participants put on a pair of really expensive-looking sunglasses. Half the group was told they were wearing authentic high-end designer shades. The other half was told they were wearing cheap knockoffs.
Okay.
Then they were given a math test where they were paid for correct answers, and they were allowed to self-report their scores.
Ah, so they had the perfect opportunity to lie and steal money without getting caught.
It's exactly this setup. Now, of the people who believed they were wearing authentic glasses, about 30% cheated and inflated their scores, which is a baseline, you know. But of the people who believed they were wearing knockoffs, 71% cheated.
No way. Over double the rate of cheating just from the sunglasses?
Just from the sunglasses. Simply wearing something they believed was fake subtly primed their brains to feel inauthentic. It lowered their internal standard of honesty just enough to unleash the short-term grasshopper.
That is wild. The perceived fakeness on their face literally translated into fake behavior on the test.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, though. Surely past behavior matters, right? I mean, if someone has lied to me 10 times, I shouldn't just assume they'll be honest today because they happen to be wearing authentic Ray-Bans.
Right.
It sounds like you're saying a person's trustworthiness isn't a solid structure like a brick wall, but more like a thermostat. You're saying it totally shifts depending on the temperature of the room they happen to be standing in.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. It is absolutely a thermostat. Past behavior does give you a baseline reading, sure, but you have to know what temperature the room is right now.
Right. Are they desperate? Are they grateful?
Exactly. Are they feeling inauthentic? And beyond that, we make another massive mistake when evaluating trust. We only look at integrity. We ask ourselves, does this person mean well? We completely forget to measure competence.
Meaning, they might be incredibly honest, but they might also be terrible at what they do.
Right. Adam Russell, a researcher who studies trust, proposes this dark but really illuminating thought experiment. Imagine you were diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Okay.
And you have a best friend who is the most honest, high-integrity, morally upright person you have ever met. Would you hand them a scalpel and let them operate on your brain?
Definitely not. I would want an actual surgeon, even if that surgeon was a complete jerk.
Because integrity without competence is totally useless when you need a specific result. Trusting your best friend in that scenario is a terrible bet. You aren't calculating their morality. You are calculating their capability.
That makes so much sense.
This raises an important question, though. If trustworthiness fluctuates like a thermostat based on context, emotion, and competence, where is the physical hardware that actually controls those shifts?
Well, we have to look at our evolutionary biology for that, right? And this gets into some incredibly deep physiological wiring. We essentially have ancient reptilian hardware still operating inside us, dictating our physical readiness to even consider trusting someone.
Yes. This is the core of Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory.
Which is fascinating.
It really is. So the vagus nerve is this massive superhighway of information running from your brain to your major organs.
Yeah.
Porges breaks our evolutionary responses into three systems. The oldest is the unmyelinated vagus nerve. This is basically your inner reptile. When a threat is completely overwhelming, this system triggers a primitive shutdown. You freeze. You literally play dead.
You drop your heart rate and just hope the predator walks past you.
Yes. Then, as evolution progressed, we developed the sympathetic adrenal system. That is your classic fight-or-flight mode. Adrenaline floods your system, your heart races, and you are prepped to physically fight the threat or, sprint away from it.
But you can't build a society if you are constantly playing dead or punching your neighbors in the face.
You really cannot. Which is why mammals evolved a third highly advanced system, the myelinated vagus nerve. Myelin is a fatty sheath that coats the nerve fibers, acting almost like insulation on a copper wire.
It speeds things up.
Exactly. It allows for much faster, more complex signaling. This myelinated system acts as a vagal brake. It actively suppresses the fight-or-flight response. It slows your heart rate, relaxes your facial muscles, and calms your body down. It enables what Porges calls social engagement.
So, to use a car analogy, you can't shift into trust or social engagement gear if your engine is still redlining in first gear, which is pure panic survival.
Yeah.
You have to actively apply that vagal brake to shift up.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And this hardware operates completely below our conscious, rational awareness. I mean, we don't think our way into detecting broken trust. Our biology just screams it at us.
Right.
We see this vividly in other primates, actually. Sarah Brosnan's famous experiments with capuchin monkeys illustrate how deeply ingrained this fairness calculation is. She trained 2 monkeys in adjacent cages to hand her a small stone token. In exchange, she gave each monkey a piece of cucumber.
Which, cucumber's pretty boring, but they're getting paid for their work.
Right. They happily did the work. They handed over the token. They ate the cucumber.
Yeah.
Over and over, until the researcher changed the payout.
Oh.
Yeah. The researcher took a token from the first monkey and gave it a delicious sweet grape. Then she asked the second monkey for a token, but gave that monkey the same boring piece of cucumber as before.
Oh no, that
Right.
poor monkey.
The monkey who got the cucumber recognized the inequity instantly. It looked at the cucumber, looked at the neighbor eating the grape, and absolutely lost its mind.
Really?
Oh yeah, it rattled the cage, it refused to hand over any more tokens, and it literally threw the cucumber back at the researcher's face. Capuchin monkeys do not have the cognitive capacity to rationally analyze economic models,
Yeah.
but their biological hardware detects the broken social contract immediately.
Which brings up a really common misconception about the chemical side of this hardware. If you read any pop science articles, you've definitely heard of oxytocin. It is constantly branded as the cuddle hormone or the moral molecule.
Oh, don't get me started.
Right. The implication is that if we could just pump oxytocin into the water supply, everyone would hold hands and trust each other.
That is a complete and dangerous myth. Oxytocin does not make you a universally trusting saint. It is true that it aids in profound bonding, like it is the hormone that spikes during childbirth to bond a mother to an infant. It promotes fierce loyalty,
But there's a catch.
a huge catch.
Yeah.
What the media ignores is how that loyalty functions.
Yeah.
Oxytocin's primary role is to protect the in-group, your tribe, your family.
And to protect the tribe, you have to defend against outsiders.
Precisely. Studies show that administering a rush of oxytocin actually increases ethnocentrism. It increases bias and bigotry toward anyone outside your group. It even increases gloating when a rival group fails.
Wow, gloating.
Yeah. It makes you aggressively loyal to your own team at the expense of everyone else. It's the chemical of tribalism, not universal peace.
That is a massive paradigm shift. But if this biological hardware, this primitive instinct to detect unfairness and protect the in-group, is basically baked into our very nerves and hormones, how do we ever learn to navigate a complex modern world?
Right, it seems impossible.
Look at children, for example. We tend to think of kids as naive little sponges who will just believe anything. But their internal trust calculations are actually ruthless.
They really are. Children are in a fascinating, highly vulnerable position. They have to rely on the testimony of adults because they just don't have the time or the cognitive development to figure out how the world works through trial and error.
That makes sense.
Bruce Hood demonstrated this with his gravity cup experiment. He built this contraption with opaque tubes that connected a row of cups at the top to a row of cups at the bottom. But the tubes were crisscrossed diagonally.
Okay, so if you drop a ball in the top left cup, it actually rolls out into the bottom right cup.
Right. But when kids drop the ball on the top, they immediately looked in the cup directly underneath it. They just assumed gravity pulls straight down. And even after doing it repeatedly and failing repeatedly, they couldn't learn the diagonal trick on their own. Their internal bias about gravity was just too strong.
But I'm guessing an adult changes that.
Exactly. The second an adult steps in and simply tells them how the opaque tubes work, they instantly learn it. They must rely on testimony to survive.
But they don't just trust any testimony. They are actively calculating the competence of the adult speaking to them.
Oh, big time. Paul Harris ran a study that proves children are active skeptics. He took 4- and 5-year-olds and gave them a choice between two adults. One was their familiar, beloved daycare teacher. The other was a total stranger.
Okay.
Before the test began, the kids watched their beloved teacher intentionally misname common objects. She would, point to a hammer and call it a fork, or point to a shoe and call it an apple.
Which is a massive betrayal of a child's reality.
It really is. The stranger, however, named everything perfectly. So, when the researchers presented a brand new, bizarre-looking object and asked the kids who they wanted to learn the name from, the results were astounding.
Who did they pick?
Those kids instantly abandoned their beloved teacher. They turned their backs on the person who comforted them every day, and they only asked the competent stranger for the information.
So a kid's brain is like a highly advanced spam filter. They aren't just downloading every file they encounter, they are actively checking the security certificate of the sender. And if the sender is dropping bad data, the kid blocks the download.
That is exactly what happens. The trust calculation literally alters how their memory functions. A child will explicitly remember information better and recall it more accurately if it comes from a source they have already calculated to be trustworthy.
But what happens when they have zero data? What if they have to choose between two strangers and neither has proven their competence yet?
That's when they revert to the tribal biology we talked about earlier with oxytocin. If a 4-year-old needs information and has to choose between two strangers, they will preferentially trust the stranger who speaks with their same accent over someone who sounds foreign.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when the data is missing, the brain just defaults to the safety of the in-group.
Okay, so we've seen how kids calculate trust to learn and survive. But as we grow into adulthood, the evolutionary stakes obviously shift. They reach their absolute peak in our intimate romantic relationships. How does the human brain handle the massive vulnerability of love?
It handles it by entirely shifting strategies. It moves from strict accounting to intuitive trust. Margaret Clark conducted a brilliant study looking at something as simple as ink pens. She examined couples in early new relationships, which are typically exchange-based.
Right.
In these early stages, partners keep a mental tally. If I pay for dinner tonight, I expect you to buy the movie tickets tomorrow.
Keeping the balance sheet even.
Exactly. Clark put these couples in a room and asked them to complete a joint task where they would be paid based on their collective work. The first partner used a red pen. When the second partner sat down to add their contribution, 90% of the people in these new relationships chose a different color ink, like a blue or black pen.
Because they wanted an objective visual record of exactly how much work they put in. They were literally protecting their investment.
They needed to verify the tally. But when Clark ran the exact same test with couples in long-term communal relationships, the behavior flipped. 75% of those partners chose the same color red pen.
They didn't even care.
They didn't care at all if their individual work blurred into their partners. Intuitive trust replaced the exhausting, cognitively draining need to constantly monitor the balance sheet.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've always been told the phrase, love is blind. But the data shows that trust actually acts like relationship noise-canceling headphones.
Oh, that's good.
It actively filters out the minor daily static so you don't accidentally blow up a great partnership over, a momentary bad mood.
Jeffrey Simpson proved this with his strain test labs. He brings couples in, hooks up physiological monitors, turns on the cameras, and literally forces them to negotiate a highly stressful conflict like a major disagreement in their relationship.
That sounds incredibly awkward.
It is. But what he found is that highly trusting partners deploy a cognitive buffer. After the stressful fight, they will subconsciously misremember the negotiation. They will actually inflate the compromises and sacrifices their partner made. They view the entire event through a rosy lens.
It's the generous tit-for-tat strategy from game theory. They forgive the occasional selfish noise to preserve the long-term gains of the relationship. But there is a catch here. This noise-canceling feature requires energy, doesn't it?
It requires a lot of executive control. Sandra Murray's research on the head versus the gut explores this beautifully. Your prefrontal cortex manages your rational thoughts. If you have high executive control, meaning you are rested, fed, not overly stressed, you can use rational analysis to soothe any doubts you have about your partner.
Okay, but what if I'm exhausted?
If you are cognitively depleted after a terrible day at work, your executive control just shuts down. Your conscious brain goes offline, and your non-conscious intuitive trust completely takes the wheel. If your deep, intuitive, gut-level trust is low, you will lash out and pull away.
And if that gut feeling senses a legitimate long-term threat to the partnership, that is when jealousy flares up. But DeSteno redefines jealousy completely here, which I found fascinating. We always assume jealousy is about sex. It isn't. It's about resources.
It is entirely about the future allocation of time, energy, and loyalty. The clearest proof of this comes from studying the swinger community.
Right.
Swingers are not consumed by jealousy when their partners engage with someone else because the outside intimacy is a mutually agreed upon hobby. It is recreational. It does not represent a breach of the core social contract, nor does it threaten to divert the partner's long-term resources away from the primary relationship.
So jealousy only triggers when there is a risk that the grasshopper is going to take the resources and run off with a rival, and the anger that accompanies that jealousy is intense.
It serves as a very specific evolutionary deterrent, which was demonstrated in a rather intense hot sauce experiment.
I love this one.
Researchers paired a participant with a partner they had only met 10 minutes prior to work on a puzzle. A few minutes in, a quote-unquote rival enters the room, starts flirting with the partner, and the partner abandons the participant to go work with the rival instead.
Betrayed after 10 minutes of knowing someone. Just brutal.
The participant is just left sitting alone. Later in the study, under the guise of a taste test, the dumped participant is tasked with preparing a sample of hot sauce for the cheating partner and the rival to consume. And the participants poured massive, physically punishing amounts of hot sauce for both of them.
But wait, why punish them so severely if the relationship was basically non-existent and already over? Like they only knew them for 10 minutes.
Because of a mechanism called third-party punishment. The participant isn't trying to win the partner back. They are acting as a deterrent. By inflicting real pain on the cheater and the poacher, they are making it biologically costly for those individuals to break trust in the future. They are essentially protecting the broader social ecosystem.
So, intimacy and relationships require massive mutual vulnerability. But what happens to our internal ant and grasshopper when you completely remove that vulnerability? What happens when you introduce immense wealth and power into the calculation?
We see the dark side of independence. Paul Piff ran an incredible observational study at a four-way intersection in San Francisco.
Yeah.
A researcher would step into the crosswalk, and observers basically tracked which cars stopped, as required by state law, and which cars illegally accelerated and cut the pedestrian off. They categorized the cars by socioeconomic status.
Oh, this brings us right back to the scenario from the very beginning of the episode.
Yes, exactly. At the lowest end of the socioeconomic spectrum, the older, cheaper, beat-up cars, 100% of the drivers stopped for the pedestrian. Every single one yielded.
Wow.
But as the value of the car increased, so did the selfishness. At the highest tier, the luxury sports cars, the high-end SUVs, nearly 50% of the drivers broke the law and aggressively cut the pedestrian off.
Wait, half. Half of the wealthy drivers endangered a pedestrian. And it goes beyond traffic laws, doesn't it?
Oh, it pervades everything. Piff's subsequent studies found that upper-class participants were significantly more likely to lie to job applicants during a mock interview. When asked to roll dice in a private booth and report their scores for cash prizes, the wealthiest participants inflated their rolls at much higher rates to win money.
Wait, hold on. Why would someone who already has money cheat to win a tiny cash prize? Is it having wealth that inherently makes someone untrustworthy, or is it something else? Because it sounds exactly like playing a video game with God mode turned on.
Right.
When you type in the cheat code and remove all risk of dying or losing, you immediately stop cooperating with your teammates. You just start blowing things up and breaking the rules because there are absolutely no consequences.
That is exactly the mechanism. It is not about how you were inherently raised. It is a temporary state of mind driven by resource dependence. Individuals with lower socioeconomic status have to trust and cooperate to survive. They literally need to pool resources. They need their neighbors to watch their kids or help fix their car. They are highly attuned to the social contract. Wealthy individuals, however, have the luxury of buying their way out of problems. They don't need their neighbors. Because they are independent, the biological necessity to cooperate vanishes. The ant just goes to sleep.
And Piff proved this was a temporary illusion of power with the candy study. Right?
He did. He brought middle-class individuals into a lab and had them complete an exercise designed to make them feel powerful by comparing themselves to people much lower on the socioeconomic ladder. He momentarily turned on their God mode. Then he left them alone in a room with a jar of candy, explicitly telling them that the candy was reserved for children participating in a study in the next room.
Stealing candy from babies. Literally.
Literally. The participants who had just been primed to feel a temporary surge of power and independence took significantly more candy from the children's jar than the control group. The momentary feeling of power silenced the cooperative ant and just unleashed the selfish grasshopper.
So what does this all mean?
If we pull all of these threads together, the overarching revelation is that the X-ray machine we use to view human behavior is fundamentally broken. Trust is not a static aura that you just carry around. It is a highly dynamic biological and psychological calculation. It shifts constantly based on whether your vagal nerve feels safe, whether you are experiencing gratitude, how much executive control you have left at the end of the day, and whether you feel a temporary surge of power.
And for you listening, you now possess the user manual for these hidden calculations. You can consciously check your ego when you get a promotion at work, knowing that power might literally blind you to the social contract. You can recognize that a fight with your partner might just be cognitive depletion, not a fatal flaw in your relationship. And you can look for competence when you need a problem solved rather than just relying on someone's likable reputation.
Exactly.
But there is one final, truly mind-bending application of this framework. If trust is an intertemporal calculation, a battle between the present and the future, that means you don't just use it on other people, you use it on yourself.
It is the exact same calculation. When you make a promise to start a new diet tomorrow, Or when you promise to put $50 from your next paycheck into a savings account, you are essentially placing a bet on a future version of yourself.
You are hoping that the future you will have the executive control to honor the deal. But knowing what we know now, that future version of you might be tired. They might be stressed, their vagal brake might be offline, or they might be feeling a little too powerful. Suddenly, your own trustworthiness fluctuates. The grasshopper takes over, and you eat the cake or spend the money. So the next time you make a promise to yourself, remember that you aren't an unbending brick wall. You're a thermostat.
A thermostat constantly adjusting to the room.
Keep calculating. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.